Hello, this is Anna. We're going to finish up the autonomic nervous system, looking at some of the weirdo things that are happening and talk about some of the exceptions with the way the autonomic nervous system works. So first of all, remember, I've always got note slides, and I know in the previous two videos I've gone over compare and contrast with sympathetic and parasympathetic. So here's another place where I've done that, and you've got this note slide, and you can go and look at it, okay? Now, we're going to talk about, again, some of the unique things, some of the exceptions with the autonomic nervous system. Something to really emphasize before we start talking about this weird stuff is the fact that dual innervation is the norm, okay? Most organs are innervated by the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division, and they work in tandem to maintain homeostasis, okay? And they work in tandem to maintain the normal maintenance responses of the body versus responding to threats and to stressors and having to do more extreme things, okay? So this is kind of summarizing some of the compare and contrast between this dual innervation between the two of these things. Let's go on. All right, what are we going to talk about next? All right, so sweat glands. Let's talk about some of the exceptions. So sweat glands are weird, okay? And we're just going to do apocrine and eccrine because that's what we've been looking at. The eccrine, so as I said, most organs have dual innervation. Your eccrine glands that you use for thermoregulation tend to have one type of innervation. They are going to be doing cholinergic fibers with the sympathetic division, okay? All right, now right about now, you might be going, but wait a minute, we thought sympathetic used epinephrine, and so it should be adrenergic. Well, this is where it gets really weird, okay? The post-ganglionic axons switch to acetylcholine, which is why it's cholinergic. Actually, let me put this in, but these are part of sympathetic division, okay? So again, weird. Sympathetic division, but the postganglionic axons switch to acetylcholine. So now they so now instead of being adrenergic, they're cholinergic, okay? This is weird, okay? Very, very weird. And they're going to be specifically muscarinic in nature, so that's what they're going to be targeting for that. Now, the exception to the exception. So let's write that exception to the exception with the eccrine glands, okay? The palms of your hands are going to be adrenergic, and this is why your hands causes your hands to sweat, causes sweaty palms when nervous, okay? So when you're nervous, your adrenaline goes up, your epinephrine goes up, the norepinephrine, and that causes the eccrine glands in the palms of your hands to become more sweaty, okay? So again, weirdness upon weirdness. Now let's talk next about the apocrine gland. Okay, apocrine gland is also the sweat gland, but remember this is basically your sex gland, the one that secretes the yummy, gooey stuff that smells really awesome, okay? Got your pheromones, responds to both sexual arousal, but it also responds to any type of stressor, okay? And that is because it is adrenergic. So when your norepinephrine or epinephrine levels go up, you will increase apocrine secretion. So when you are running from a bear, you're going to release more sexual pheromones because your adrenergic gland, the apocrine glands are responding to the adrenergic stimulus. Okay? All right, what else can we do to add to the weirdness here? The blood vessels to these sweat glands are adrenergic. Okay, so they dilate, okay, in response to sympathetic innervation. So you increase blood flow to those glands, okay? Now, let's just talk a little bit more about blood vessels, just in general. Because the blood vessels can get kind of wonky in terms of trying to keep everything straight on what's going on with them. In general, the blood vessels are innervated by the sympathetic division, okay? And pretty much solo, sympathetic division only, okay? The exception is going to be the genitalia, okay, which are going to have parasympathetic innervation for vasodilation. Okay, so that's a little bit different. Typically what's going to happen most of the time is with the sympathetic stimulus, and we're going to abbreviate blood vessels BV so that I don't have to write it all out. The blood vessels are going to vasoconstrict. All right, and they do this to raise blood pressure, okay? But we've got exceptions, all right? Skeletal muscle, all right? Heart and lungs, all right? The sympathetic innervation causes vasodilation, because if you're running from a dragon, you want to have lots and lots of blood flow to skeletal muscle, heart, and lungs for your fight, flight, or freeze response. Okay? What else can we talk about? Let's change topic a little bit and talk about some of the unique roles of the sympathetic division. Okay? So thermoregulation. Okay, so it's going to do blood vessel dilation. All right, so you got blood vessel dilation. It's going to do activate your sweat glands. Okay, it also stimulates the erector pili muscles. Okay. You're also going to use the sympathetic division for the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism. And what it does is it helps increase the release of renin from the kidneys. Okay? And then renin, in turn, is going to be important for increasing blood pressure. Okay? And you can see that that's important if you're running from a bear. You need to have higher blood pressure, okay? And then you've got, or a dragon. I don't know. Do you want to run from a dragon or a bear? I don't know. Which one's more interesting? How about we switch over to a wyvern, okay? Metabolic effects. So it increases metabolism overall, the metabolic rate of your cells, right? It's going to increase blood glucose levels. It's going to increase the recruitment of fat for usage, okay? And it's also going to increase the activity and the reticular activating system for mental clarity, mental alertness, okay? Now I want you to think about it. If you are in a dangerous situation and you need to be thinking about staying alive, but you also need to have the resources for keeping your muscles and body going, okay? So this one lets you think a little bit clearer. The blue check marks keep your body so that you can actually run away, okay? So the sympathetic division is important for that stimulus to keep that going, okay? Let's talk about next the role of the central nervous system. Okay, so really we're going to kind of focus in on the brain and the spinal cord next. So you've got your hypothalamus. And remember, the hypothalamus is the heart of the autonomic nervous system and the limbic system. Okay, so it is going to be the main controller of the autonomic nervous system. It's what's going to be regulating heart activity, blood pressure, body temperature, biological drives, emotional responses to fear, all of this stuff. So the autonomic nervous system and, of course, the fear response, the happiness response, the emotional response, it's all part of that as well. Okay? And then you've got the role of the brainstem, okay, and the spinal cord. So what you can kind of think about is that this is the commander-in-chief, okay? These are kind of like the generals over here. And this is going to be regulating that. Now, there are some reflexes where you don't have to do that much regulation, but just to keep it simple, I want you to think of it that way, okay? So what's really important with the brainstem is remembering all of those reticular formations in the basal nuclei. Okay, so these are going to execute the orders from the big H, the hypothalamus, and some more reflexive activities as well. Okay, and then you have the cerebral cortex. Now, with the cerebral cortex, this is kind of where you can throw in the concept of biofeedback. So people have probably heard about biofeedback, how if you hook yourself up to a monitor so that you can see your heart rate, and then you can do mental exercises or breathing exercises, and then you can alter your heart rate, that sort of stuff. So this is where you're going to be kind of like conscious awareness of what your organs and body are doing. Okay, so it's going to be that kind of interaction. But you've also got the whole memory trigger thing going on. So memories can trigger your heart rate going up. You can remember a terrible situation and your heart rate goes up. Or you can remember how cute Billy Bob was in the 6th grade and your heart rate starts to go up and you get butterflies in your stomach. So memories can trigger visceral reactions. Okay? So the central nervous system is definitely involved with the autonomic nervous system, even though the autonomic nervous system is basically associated with the peripheral nervous system. So let's talk a little bit about homeostatic imbalances. And then we've got a little picture to follow up with, to look at it with the heart. The two that I find most interesting is this interplay between hypertension versus hypotension. Okay, so hypertension, if we're looking at our blood vessels, this is where you have overactive sympathetic vasoconstriction within the body. All right, that makes your blood vessels too narrow, and then your heart has to work harder. And then your heart begins to hypertrophy, okay? And it gets big and fat, and then you get congestive heart failure. All right? So remember that the hypothalamus is connected with the autonomic nervous system. So being under high stress, because your hypothalamus is experiencing that emotional response, the hypothalamus will also trigger this vasoconstriction of those blood vessels in your arms and legs. All right, now your heart has to pump harder with more force in order to overcome that pressure to send blood to the different parts of your body. Okay, now hypotension is referring to basically lowered responsiveness of the blood vessels to vasoconstriction. Okay, so this becomes really common in our elders. They get a condition called orthostatic hypotension. And basically what happens there is that the blood vessels, because they become less responsive, you basically stand up and you change your blood pressure, and they don't constrict in the legs fast enough, which means your blood pressure temporarily goes down and blood flow to the brain goes down as well. All right, that causes the sensations of dizziness, faintness, that kind of stuff. Now, eventually the blood vessels in the legs constrict, the blood pressure goes up, and you get better delivery back up to your head, okay? But probably most of y'all have had at least once or twice, maybe frequently, the situation where you're laying down and you get up really fast and then you feel really dizzy, okay? And then it goes away. That is orthostatic hypotension. Okay, let's look at our last picture, which is showing you the interplay of the autonomic and the parasympathetic stimulation of the heart. You want to remember this one for AMP2. So if we're looking over here, all right, they're showing in green sympathetic innervation, and they're showing in purple the parasympathetic innervation. Now you can see where things are synapsing, and this one is going to come out, and it's going to be part of the cranial nerve, vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is going to come over here, and it's basically going to slow down the heartbeat. So it's inhibiting heart contraction. It's hyperpolarizing these autorhythmic cells here. And it needs to do this because the heart at rest beats too fast. So you need to be constantly slowing it down from 100 to 75 beats per minute, okay? Then the sympathetic innervation is coming here, and it's following its typical pathway, going into the paravertebral ganglionic chain, coming over here. And what it can do is it starts to excite these centers for autorhythmic cells, and it causes the heart to depolarize faster. Okay? And then if things go wrong, things can go wrong here, here, it could go here, here, here. You can always install a pacemaker, which is basically going to have electrodes that come over here to these centers where you are going to depolarize the heart muscle, and it will basically counteract the natural screwed up rhythms so that your heart beats at the rate that you want it to. So what you need to remember is this part: parasympathetic, vagus, and slow. Parasympathetic, vagus, slow. Parasympathetic, vagus, slow. Sympathetic increases. Sympathetic increases. Okay, memorize that because you're going to need it in AMP2. I can guarantee it'll be on a test in AMP2. Okay? All right, we're going to stop there. And that is the last of the videos in the autonomic nervous system series.